Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to brand new Division video. What I've guys today are the PTS Wave 2 patch notes for the Division 2 for Title Update 6. If you guys play the PTS, you guys can go ahead and test them out on PC. If you don't, these are pretty much the changes they are looking at, and keep in mind, these changes are on the PTS, so it doesn't mean 100% of them are going to stick to the game. Some of them can still be changed, some of them can be even erased, but this is what they're looking at, and this is what they're kind of testing out right now for Title Update 6. So I'm going to show you guys all the patch notes for Wave 2. Some of them are pretty good, some of them are kind of bad, in my opinion. So if you guys enjoyed this video or find it helpful, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for my videos, and let's get right into this. Alright, so first of all, I will say I'm not going to go over all the patch notes and go one by one. I will go over the most important ones in my opinion, so if you guys want to check out the full thing, I will have a link in the description, you guys can check it out. But the first thing that kind of caught my eye is the stash space. So increase stash space by 150 slots. The player starts with 200 and can upgrade to 300 slots total through perks in the game. So really good news. I know there has been thousands and thousands of people asking for stash space, including myself, because right now what we have is just not enough with the amount of gear you get, especially the trash gear. So having more stash space, really amazing, a really great change, and this will definitely be, I would say, in the full game when this update comes out. Then we have some options and controls. I'm not really going to go over that. We have some balancing changes for PvP, some damage adjustment for the pulse, turrets, cam launchers, stuff like that. The next thing I want to go over is actually the exotic holster talents. So they are changing some of them for the chatterbox, and keep in mind this is the holster talent, so it's the third talent on these exotics. So for the chatterbox, it's getting a nerf. And what it says is, while holstered, reloading your weapon within 5 seconds after a kill grants 15% down from 20% rate of fire for 10 seconds. So it's pretty much a 5% rate of fire decrease. For the Nemesis, while holstered, gain plus 15% down from plus 25% headshot damage. When scoped with your current weapon, PvP version remains unchanged at plus 10%. So this is pretty much just a change for PvE. So you'll be losing about 10% of headshot damage. The Merciless, it's a buff, getting a buff. So while holstered, landing a shot has a 5% chance to deal plus 100% up from 20% damage as explosive damage. So that's pretty much getting a buff. So if you want to make a build with that, it's going to be a little bit stronger now. And moving down to the exotic talent. So first up for the chatterbox, it's getting a buff. So every shot landed grants plus 1% rate of fire to the max of 60%. This resets on reload. Kills with this weapon refill 75% up from 20% of its magazine and grants a buff for 10 seconds. And also it says, while the buff is active, every shot landed increases magazine capacity by 3 up from 1 to the max of 60. Killing a target consumes the buff to fully refill the increased magazine. So it's getting a buff a little bit, except for the last talent. The last talent on this weapon is getting a nerf, but besides that, it is getting a buff. The Sweet Dreams, they added a new functionality. So now landing a melee attack on an enemy after swapping to this weapon grants 60% up from 35% bonus armor and applies the Sandman debuff. PvP bonuses, armor remains at 35%. Killing an enemy with the Sandman debuff reapplies the bonus armor. This debuff prevents the enemy from using armor kits and from receiving healing from any source. While equipped, dodging reloads 25% of your current weapon's magazine, and if drawn, dodging grants plus 50% weapon damage for 2 seconds, which is the new functionality. So now, that's the new kind of functionality to this weapon. So it seems pretty good. You're going to receive plus 50% weapon damage for 2 seconds. So yeah, pretty interesting. 50% weapon damage is kind of a lot, but it is only for 2 seconds. The Pestilence received a buff. So what they say is, after hitting the same enemy 10 times, the enemy is inflicted with a plague of the outcast for 10 seconds. Whenever an enemy with a plague of outcast is killed, they leave a toxic cloud for 10 seconds that deals 1200% up from 400% weapon damage per second to anyone inside and inflicts them with Pestilence. PvP version remains at 500%. This debuff reduces healing received by 50% for 10 seconds. Whenever an enemy with Pestilence would be downed, they are instead instantly killed, and Pestilence is removed if the enemy is repaired to full armor. So that's pretty much a buff once again. Up next we have the Merciless, and this one received a buff. So the first thing they did was RPM increased from 260 to 400. This weapon is also equipped with a binary trigger that fires on trigger pull and release. Pulling the trigger fires primary rounds that stay embedded in the enemy. Releasing the trigger fires detonator rounds that detonate all primaries on an enemy it hits. Each primer detonated gains plus 100% up from 75% damage per primer detonated. PvP version remains at plus 75%. Only one enemy can have primers, and at most 5 primers can be embedded. So that's pretty much a buff once again. Now moving down for the Eagle Bearer, this is something a lot of you guys had feedback on once you realized they did nerf it a little bit. So this is pretty much the adjustment for Wave 2 of the PTS. So first up, base damage reduced by 15%. Accuracy increases as you consistently fire up to 100%. Headshot kills grant plus 100% reload speed, plus 50% up from 35% damage, and the tenacity buff for 10 seconds. PvP version remains at 35%. The strength of tenacity is increased by 1% for body shots and 5% for headshots. 40 through 80% up from 20 to 80% of damage taken is delayed until the buff expires. And finally, all the total delay damage is reduced for each enemy killed while the buff is active, up to 100% with 3 down from 5 kills. So although they did reduce the base damage of the Eagle Bearer, they did kind of up some of the damage and some of the other functions of the weapon. So I'm not really sure how it's going to play out. I personally don't have the Eagle Bearer, so I can't really test it out. But, you know, if you have it, if you are playing on the PTS and stuff, let me know how you like it. Let me know if you can see some of the changes and if you think this is going to improve the weapon a little bit, although the base damage did get reduced by 15% for Phase 2. Then we have the Diamondback. This one received a buff for PvE. So the Diamondback randomly marks an enemy. Hitting the enemy consumes the mark, guaranteeing a critical hit with plus 20% total damage. A new random target is marked afterwards and whenever you reload. After hitting 5 marked targets, gain plus 50% reload speed, plus 20% total damage, and all shots fired are guaranteed critical hits for 10 seconds, 15 seconds. While drawn, each time a round is loaded, gain plus 20% up from plus 15%, bonus armor for 3 seconds. Although current live version text says 20%, this was bugged and only did 15%, it now grants 20% instead of 15%. So this one received a buff for PvE. And finally, for PvP, the Diamondback actually received a new functionality. So what they say is headshots against players are guaranteed to critical hit and provide a stack of deep fangs. Non-player enemies, such as NPCs and player skills, will be marked randomly by Diamondback and also provide stacks when hit. So this is pretty much the new change for PvP with the Diamondback. Now up next we have some new talents. We have the Spark. So what it says is damaging enemies with skills or grenades grants plus 15% weapon damage for 15 seconds. Spark can be found on backpack items. New requires 9 offensive attributes. We have Vigilance, gain 25% weapon damage. Receiving damage disables this buff for 5 seconds. Vigilance can be found on chest items. New requires 7 offensive attributes. We have Concussion, headshot grants plus 20% headshot damage for 2 seconds, 5 seconds with marksman rifles. Concussion can be found on mask items, will require 7 offensive attributes. And we have a new one, which is called Composure. While on cover, grants 10% total weapon damage. Composure can be found on knee pad items, requires 11 offensive attributes. So these are pretty much the new talents for TU6. And then we have some different talent changes. I kind of went over those in my other video, but if you want to see them, these are pretty much the changes. They pretty much buffed some of them. It looks like they pretty much buffed all of them. So that's that. We have some gear talent changes again. I did go over this in my previous video as well. The one I actually kind of want to go over in this video without making it too long is actually the weapon changes and some of the increases and decreases of damage they did do. So the first one we have is assault rifles. So for the ARs, the ACR received a buff. This received a 3% damage increase. The AUG received a 3% damage increase. The Carbine 7 received a 8% damage increase. F2000 received a 5% damage increase. The FAL received a 3% damage increase. G36 received a 3% damage increase. also less damage drop-off past optional range. The M4 received a 10% damage increase, which is pretty good, I would say. The P416 received a nerf, minus 5% damage decrease. The TAR-21 received a 8% damage increase. Moving down for the LMGs, so the first one we have is the HK121. This received a 9% damage buff. The KAG or the CAG, whatever you say it, received a 5% damage increase. The M249 received a nerf. This is a minus 4% damage decrease. M60 minus 10% damage decrease. The RPK received a 5% damage increase. And the SA80 received a 6% damage increase. Moving down for the marksman rifles. So the first one we have is the M700 Tactical. This received a 19% damage increase. M700 Carbine received a 19% damage increase. Classic M44 Carbine received a 14% damage increase. Hunting M44 has a 8% damage increase. Custom M44 received a 19% damage increase, and the SRS received a 11% damage increase. So it looks like all the marksman rifles did receive a buff for this patch. So if you are making a sniper build or maybe one-shot build, something like that for PvP or PvE, it's going to be a little bit easier with the damage buffs. Then we have the rifles. So the ACR SS received a 19% damage increase. M16 68% damage increase, which is, wow, that's a lot. 68% damage increase. They should have made it 69, but whatever. Classic M1A received a 39% damage increase. SOCOM M1A received a 30% damage increase. M1A CQB received a 30% damage increase. Lightweight M4 received a 11% damage increase. LWAC got a 12% damage increase. The SIG received a 7% damage decrease, which kind of sucks. I kind of like that weapon. It was pretty good. It wasn't the best one, but it was pretty good for rifles. The 1886 received a 20% damage increase, less damage drop-off past optional range. So I feel like the 1886, if you don't have the Diamondback, is going to be really fun to use, especially on like semi one-shot builds or two-shot builds for PvE. The MDR received a 16% damage increase, less damage drop-off past optional range, and the MK17 received a buff of 17%. So that's pretty much for the rifles. The only one that did get nerfed was the SIG 716. Besides that, all the other ones did receive a buff. So again, for rifle builds, this is some good news. Moving down for the SMGs, so the first one we have is the AUG. This one received a 15% damage increase. MP5, 13% damage increase. MP7, 7% damage increase. MPX received a 38% damage increase, which is again kind of a lot. P90, a 25% damage increase. SMG9, 6% damage increase. The T821 received a 8% damage decrease. The Thompson received a 12% damage increase. Tommy Gun, 6% damage increase. UMP 45 received a 14% damage increase, also less damage drop-off past optional range. The Tactical Vector SBR received a 21% damage increase. The Vector SBR9 received a 17% damage increase, and also the Vector 45 ACP received a 25% damage increase. So, from these patch notes and the changes to these SMGs, I feel like the SMG kind of builds are going to be kind of back. Now it's just Eagle Bearers and P416s, but hopefully with these changes and increases to damage, we could see a little bit more kind of like SMG builds or maybe even rifle builds being used and kind of made around. So pretty good news, pretty good changes, I would say. Most of the weapons did receive a buff, so that's always good. Some of them did receive a nerf, which kind of sucks, as I said, but the majority of them did again get buffed, so that's pretty cool. Anyways, that's going to be the video. There's a lot of different changes. Again, as I said, a little bit more of like weapon talent changes and PvP gear changes and stuff. So if you want to check out everything, check out the description. I will have a link to this patch notes, but that's going to be it for the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.